Hello. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel, Reverend MeeLing, also known as Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle. Been known by a few names. So, before I show a particular picture or set of pictures, I have discussed this-ish in a few prior official YouTube videos of mine. I've had a few, apparently they're called encounters, I guess, or experiences, or I don't know. So I'm going to show this particular picture I took when I was in Montana in 2016. And so let me turn it so that way you can see. So here is well, let's see, hopefully you can see specifically this little green orb. I don't know if the camera can pick up on that. But there's a green, let's see if it works this way. It's like right there. But nonetheless, there's that. And then there's this picture that I had taken. I know you can see the flames in that regard in the sky. That's again when I was in Montana. And then get to a couple, so this one's really cool. When I was in Idaho in 2017, there's this little itty bitty little black dot up here, but this stuff right here is kind of blocking it, so let me see. There it is. So there's a little black dot, and that's a helicopter. Though, it's a different looking helicopter, realistically, if you look at it, because you don't really see the helicopter blades the way you normally do. And that was in Idaho in 2017. And then, what's it? There's one more set. Oh. So, some other pictures that I've taken in specific. Hold on. Oh yeah. So took these in a sequence. Hold on. Took these in a sequence. And you can see, I don't know if you can, in the reference of the way the clouds change, like within just a few seconds of the others. And then, okay, so there's this. You can see the stuff in the clouds, but also the red in the lower part of the pictures. And so I have discussed in prior YouTube official videos of mine in regards to certain experiences, and with this one you can see a red flash in that regard. So I've had a few experiences. Over the years. I didn't really think they were that big of a deal. Not in a negative way, just more along the lines of I didn't think I was the only one. And I mean, maybe in some ways, I guess now I kind of realize that. Um, I just didn't think that, well, realistically, as much stuff as I had already been dealing with, that very few people had believed me. Why would anybody believe that on top of what I've already been dealing with up until that point? I mean, you can only be told so many times that nobody believes you, or very few people do, before you just, okay, I'll just stop speaking then. What's the point? In regards to my first more memorable experience and stuff like that, I mean, I know that there were a few before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, but I guess because of my head injury and the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain, and the coma, and then the headaches and migraines, and then the memory deficits and cognitive disorders. I don't know if the college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math has anything to do with that particular aspect, but there were some experiences that I remember from before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I just can't remember them as vividly. I know there were certain situations, and mainly, the ones that I mainly do remember were essentially after my first ritual that I had done. It was a ritual for essentially an hour, maybe an hour and a half every night for 7 days. I had done a meditation ritual / however you want to put it in words, one every single night. And there were a couple situations. I know that there was a time when I was in 5th grade, and I had mono Epstein-Barr bronchitis, Lyme's disease, and the flu all at the same time. And there was this white van, which is really weird because it's more of a current model of van that had shown up at the house that I was growing up in New Jersey than I've seen from that time frame, that had shown up with different individuals. And there was one in particular who was afraid of my dog, and I had to show him that he wasn't as scary as the guy thought. At that time, I just figured it was because I had mono Epstein-Barr bronchitis, Lyme's disease, and the flu all at the same time. So I just kind of figured, maybe I was just dreaming in that regard, and it wasn't anything more than that. Not being rude, just it's in 5th grade. I mean, I had already been made fun of for the nightmare later turned dream that I had, so why would I essentially think that it was anything to pay attention to or even realistically speak about? And that was back before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And there were other times I do remember when I was walking around certain areas, usually at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, when walking the grounds, I mean, that was partially how I wound up sitting on top of the some of the mausoleums and having tea or coffee, depending on with whomever, and nobody at the church could figure out how I got up there. I tried telling them, they didn't believe me because I was just a child. And whatever. But after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, I know that there were a few times before I got into scuba diving. I just, didn't really ever say anything because of what I was dealing with at the time. And I had tried at one point in time to tell my now dead ex-husband, and I dealt with the conversation, so I just didn't ever bring that up again with him, because that just wasn't worth it at all. Not in the slightest. And there were a couple other times. There was one time when I was living in my apartment on USAA Boulevard, where I was just sitting on my back patio, and it was after I had called 911 at that point in time, probably by a couple of weeks, and I was just sitting on my back patio, and the orb in the first picture, the green one with the cross in it, floated to where one of the chairs were. And I thought that I had sleep deprivation at the time, so I couldn't have, actually been, visited in that regard. I thought it was just, I haven't slept in a while, nervous about stuff, whatever. And then a few other times, and again, I didn't really talk about it because why? Who would I contact about that? And with my head injury issues, again, who would believe me, right? Especially with what I was dealing with, and that was I was in 2005 with the orb that was like that, in my back patio apartment. And then there was this one time, and this was just before I had dealt with the first separation. I had gotten a tent, a camping tent, and I had made my own makeshift sweat lodge, because San Antonio is hot. And so I could make a little thing and not actually need the rocks that were heated up in San Antonio to do that. And I was sitting outside of the tent one night, and obviously my son and my daughter were taken care of at that point, and it was at night. I do know that. And there was this oak leaf, and it was just floating, and I was like, I can't be seeing that. Like, I can't, this is weird. And so I pretend this is the oak leaf, but it's not. It's obviously my e-cigarette. So I went like this, and the oak leaf just stayed right there. I was like, what is it? And as I just kind of moved my hand all around it, the oak leaf just stayed there. So then I pulled on the leaf, and it moved, and then it went right back to where it was. And I just, what? And so then I, it was a real oak leaf. I just, and I did try to explain that one to my Reiki teacher. I had told him about that one. I was like, I don't get it. really weird. Just stayed there. And he was like, well, maybe it was a fairy. And I was like, no, I know the difference between fairies. And that wasn't a fairy. And I don't know what that was. I don't have words for that. And he was just, well, you know, maybe it's, no, it wasn't a dragon. It wasn't that. And he, you know, he had listed off a bunch. And I'm like, no, I don't know what that was. I've never seen anything like that before. And I've seen some stuff. But that, no, I haven't ever seen that. I haven't experienced that before. That was extremely different. I thought that maybe there was a string somewhere. No, nothing. It went straight back to the same spot it started in. And it just, what is going on? And that particular aspect happened once or twice after that. That would be in the backyard in my San Antonio house backyard once, and then once in my backyard in Carrollton. And I had never seen that before. And then, whatchamacallit, then after that happened in the backyard at the Carrollton house, I already had a trampoline in the backyard for my son and my daughter, and there was a fairy ring that had grown underneath the trampoline. It was a perfect circle of a bunch of mushrooms, and it was just one of those, what? Like, there should be, it was just a complete circle of mushrooms, and it was only on the exterior. It wasn't inside. It was the weirdest thing I had ever seen. And who would I tell about that, right? And so I had tried explaining certain things, but by that point, then other stuff started happening. And who would I tell, right? By that point, I had already landed at the bottom of the ocean and surfaced from 3 different locations. And, you know, the first one being in Cozumel, second one being from out from Boca Raton, and then the third one in the Matthias Abyss. And nobody believed me at the time. And the few who did, you know, they didn't really talk with me much about it. And then stuff really kicked up in reference to what occurred with McCoy Elementary School in Carrollton, Texas, of Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District. And then there was a situation with a male that I was dating at the time. I don't know if it's really considered dating per se. I know we were like we were hanging out, but it wasn't actually. I don't know. It was a really weird situation. And he had dealt with claw marks on his back, all over his back, from the top of his neck all the way down to his ankles, just claw marks. And he freaked out, and I'm like, well, there's a bunch of reasons in that regard, but that is what it is. And that was after the the flies that showed up in the back patio area. And then when living in Irving at the apartment complex there, where the law firm across the field, which I didn't even know that they were there until afterwards, I was sitting on my back patio, and there were these extremely bright lights, extremely bright. And there were a couple of nights when that had occurred. And the first time that it occurred on that back patio, the lights just hovered. And then the next time, the lights hovered, and then a couple of them came onto the patio, similarly to when at my apartment off of USAA Boulevard. And they just kind of stood there, and I just kind of looked at them like, what's going on? What is happening? I don't understand. And then there was the third time where I'd been shown a bunch of stuff. And there were a couple other times after that, and I don't know how to put it. I guess there was just the understanding and knowledge that at that time nobody was really gonna believe me about. I mean, I actually was warned of that one of the nights after the looking at the different pathways. And, you know, they were, whatever you want to call them, they were actually glad that I hadn't spoken about it yet. And it's just one of those, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm dealing with all this sort of stuff, and it's very difficult for anybody to believe me as it is. And essentially, you know, whatever, you believe in that regard, I was essentially told that there would be a point in time when I could speak about it, and people, some would believe and others would just not want to, but there'd be a larger amount of people who actually would believe. And I'm like, oh, okay. Everything I'm dealing with right now, it's kind of difficult for me to believe that. And, it just kind of was what it was at that time. And, then, the San Antonio apartment, again, on my back patio. And, essentially, just kind of walked through the blinds and the wrought iron patio fence. Just walked right through it and just sat down, and it wasn't the orb thing, it was the way, they had revealed themselves before. And they just wanted to talk. So we talked. And then I wound up in Washington State, and when I started going on my Medal of Honor art project trip, the different ones, there were a few times where there weren't people there before, and there were no cars that were anywhere. And like for an example, I don't remember what town I was in, but all of a sudden there were two people there, one on each side, and they asked me what I was doing. I looked at them and I'm doing my Medal of Honor art project, and I explained the whole thing. And they looked at me and they were like, well, that's a very nice thing that you're doing. And I looked around and there was no car in the entire area except for the one I drove. And they just kind of walked around And they're just, well, that's very different, what you're doing. And I just kind of looked at them like, yeah, well, explain the patriotism thing. And they just kind of looked at me. And then they were gone. And they weren't spirits. I know that, because I know the difference in that regard. And again, no vehicles, except for mine that was there. And I finished the rubbing and I left. And there were a couple other places where that occurred, and I just kind of, well, just doing my Medal of Honor project. And I didn't write about that at all because I didn't think it was really that big of a deal. I mean, it's just me. And, I had never had experiences. I mean, I had, but not, like, they weren't always the same. And it was just one of those, okay, well, it's different. I don't know what to say. Because, I mean, what do you say to stuff like that? And I've told people before, I've believed that, human beings aren't the only intelligent life forms on Earth or even in the Milky Way galaxy or any of the different galaxies throughout the universe. And usually I was laughed at, and I was like, okay, well, whatever. And so, I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that. I mean, other than the truth, of course, just, I don't know what questions there are, which would be easier for me to answer in that regard. But just, I don't know. And then, driving back from Washington State and then the Montana Vortex, and then winding up in Roswell, New Mexico. And then there was a bunch of stuff that freaked me out there. On the drive, in the area of Roswell, New Mexico, there were points where I could not get out fast enough. Yeah, it was there. There were, I don't know what that was. There were these, I don't know what they're called, and they move fast. I mean, really, really fast. And I know I move fast, but they moved faster than me. And there were points where I was genuinely nervous. And for me to be nervous, that's something that should be taken into consideration, because I don't get nervous easily. And I was nervous. And there were a few points when I was genuinely scared. And I don't get scared easily. And so there were, I don't know how to put that into words, what I saw. I've never seen anything like that before. And I mean, I landed at the bottom of the ocean, and where I was, you better shut your face, don't make me punch you in the face to defend myself. Cute little TV that, that all I saw was pure white. Up and down and side to side because of how big the one tooth was. I'll defend myself. Don't have an idea as to what I saw. And I know it probably sounds really, really weird. There's no denying that. But that was... I was scared. And then there were just these, after getting out of New Mexico and once getting into the state of Texas, then there were all of these animals that were not animals. They like, I saw them as animals after they turned into animals. But before they turned into animals, I don't know what they were. Like, I saw, but I don't know what to call that. And how quickly they turned in. I mean, so there was this point when I was in South Dakota. I tried explaining this to some people. This point I was in South Dakota, and I was driving towards the Mason one in South Dakota. And there was just this, I had this overwhelming urge to just slam on my brakes. And right when I did, there was this herd of, I don't know what they were. I tried describing them, and they're not antelope. They were not antelope. They were not deer. They were not, I call them meses, but they were not moose at all. And I don't know what they were. And there was a herd of them. And when I say a herd, I don't mean like a small group of like 20 or 30. I'm talking like hundreds. And they ran across, and then they were gone. And I didn't even see where they ran to. Like, they got to the other side of the road, and that was it. They were gone. And that was after driving through Idaho, and like all these really weird bugs, like all on the ground, and like just this thing bouncing off of the car tire well, and just this ooby gooby stuff. I know that is not really a good term, but whatever. Just this ooby gooby green stuff on the road, and those bugs were so gross. Oh, they were so gross. Oh, they were so gross. I don't like bugs to begin with. They were huge, and they sounded like actual rocks bouncing off of the tire well. It's just, ew, 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 ew. I don't like bugs. And like, ew. And but yeah, in South Dakota, that herd of whatever, I don't know what they were. And then when I was actually in the area of trying to find the Mason area, a whole bunch of them started running up the hill. And oh, okay, well, I guess I don't need to get that Medal of Honor guy. I'm going to just reverse out of here because I don't know what you're running from, but I don't want to find out. That was my math. I don't know what you're running from, but I'm going to be the lowest on the food chain totem pole. I don't think so. Bye-bye. You, what are you? And the thing is with scuba diving, I learned, fish identification, so that way when going to certain areas, I'd be able to know. And so when I would go for my Medal of Honor art project trips, I'd make sure to look up the animals in the vicinity, so that way I knew what to do to a degree. And I don't know what they were. And then there was, when I was in Spokane, Washington, and there was I don't know what that was. There was a big one and a little one, and I took pictures, and I can't access them for whatever excuse. And the whatever it was changed shape. Like in one picture it looked like a deer, the next picture it looked like a, I don't know, the next picture it looked like a lion, the next and it was just quick pictures. And then there was a coyote, and then there was a fox, and just, okay, maybe I had too much to smoke? No, I didn't smoke. Okay. I can't. What is that? And then the little one that was over by the forest area did the exact same thing. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was quite different. That is definitely a way to put it. But in reference to the picture with the green orb and cross, that, or the shield, or however, that was the night that there was a really big hailstorm, and it cracked the window. One of the stones, the hailstones. I was just, that's different. It's very, very different. And so there were some situations that I've dealt with. And so I don't know what I saw last night as far as when in Roswell, when leaving Roswell, New Mexico, when in the state of Texas, like from the Brownsville area. There were a couple things I saw, and then I don't know what they were. And then, where was it? It's on this highway, and I had to turn back around because GPS did whatever. I had to re-drive on the same road. I think it was 87 or something like that, or 71. And just, they kinda-ish looked like deer, but not. And they weren't deer when I first saw them. And then they were deer. And then they weren't there. And I don't know. And then there were a bunch that just, as I was driving, there wasn't anything there. And then I blinked, and then they were there. I don't know what that is. And so if somebody could tell me, that'd be great. I don't know what that was. It was very nerve-wracking. and a little angering because I haven't ever seen anything like that. But they all essentially had their noses to the ground. Like there were only one or two that actually had their heads up, and then as I drove past, they lowered their heads. And I was just, okay, what is going on? This is really scary for me because I don't know what's going on. I don't understand this at all, and I know it probably comes across as really, really weird. How do you think it was for me? And is. And so I've had a few experiences, and so I don't know if that's considered, because they weren't spirits. I know the difference between spirits, and I don't know what those were, but they were not at all. Those were not spirits. There's a very, very big difference. And so even like at the, the McMillan Mausoleum, there was that older grandfather with two younger children, and I had written to the San Juan Islands in Washington State about that, and those were not spirits, and I don't know where they came from. It's extremely different. And so, and then there's the stuff that I could do in the Montana Vortex. And apparently, I guess that's not necessarily the most normal thing, to be able to just, do yoga. And push-ups, apparently. And so, yeah, like, I don't know who I'm supposed to technically contact about that. I kind of figure, I don't know. I don't know if that means I'm going to get a visit from the United States of America's government. I didn't do anything wrong. I hope that I didn't do anything wrong. But yeah, I don't know what those were. And I don't know. I know that ever since I was a child, the only thing I can draw are eyes. I can paint stuff, which is different. I can carve stuff out of wood. It's different. I can only draw eyes. I can kind of draw other stuff, but the detail that I can do for eyes, that's it. That's all I can do. And that is something I have done since I was a child. And that's it. As far as like drawing stuff, I mean, I can draw kind of clothes-ish, but when it comes to like the detail work, it's only eyes. And I don't know how to put that other than that. So, comment and share and like my official YouTube channel. Maybe somebody can give me an answer on that, of what I saw that I don't know. forum will wind up being asked, and I don't know. I'm sure there are people who actually have like questions. So, you know, you can contact me and let me know, and then I can answer them, because I don't know what to explain beyond that. That was just very, very different. Don't deny that. So, you guys have a good one.